Hi, and welcome to the Unhinged History Podcast, the podcast where two compulsive nut jobs will separately and silently, by themselves, read history memes that trigger them to do deep dives into the research that you wouldn't do. And then we join forces and tell each other the stories we've only recently learned that our partners are tired of hearing and record the conversation for you. I'm Theresa, and
I'm
that's,
Angie, but you do that silently? I do no part of this process is silent for me.
well, I'm in my office with the door shut. So if a tree falls in the woods, does it make any noise?
Okay,
Did I
I'll let
have
you
to
have
go
it.
philosophical on this? I don't know. But welcome. It's episode 100.
Booyah!
Angie, we've been consistent for 100 weeks.
That's better than I could say for any houseplant I've ever had.
I think it's joint, you and I both saying, come on, you need to water that. You need to come on, let's do the thing.
Can you get out of bed? Okay, let's go then.
Hey, you're gonna have trouble getting out of bed next week, so we should record two episodes this week so that you
That
don't
has
have to get
happened.
out of bed.
That has happened. Yeah.
I think that's been the real lifesaver.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm here for it 100 times.
Damn.
Think of all the therapy bills we've been paying for people.
Or causing.
Same. Honestly, the therapists of the world should be uniting to pay us.
Oh my gosh. I had a conversation with a human today, and his
An
response was
actual one?
like a legitimate, it was over Zoom. So I mean, still human. Um,
Sort of, yeah.
but his response was, so I was, you have a podcast, and I was like, yes. And then he goes, yeah, I was listening to said podcast. And I got to I was looking through the titles. The titles are hilarious. I don't know who names them, but you had me at Jay-Z as my financial planner.
Yes, that's like episode 3, isn't it?
Two. I was like, that was a deep cut. That was a deep cut. And he goes, yeah, genius naming. And I said, well, but like we name them off things we say in the show. So we listen back and go, okay, that was hilarious. We write it down. And he goes, oh no, I realized that because I read the transcript.
That's terrifying.
And I'm just like, he goes,
Thanks
so
for
yeah,
caring.
you've got a listener. And I was like, yay.
Thank you. Jay-Z is really our financial planner.
And because I said, but that was the truth though, that, I was like, I'd have to listen to his entire discography to tell you what song it was in. He goes, I won't force you to do it.
But just saying, just saying.
Yeah. I mean, and for those of you playing at home, if you can't buy it twice, you can't afford it. And I think that's just good advice in general. Live within your means.
Facts. Yeah, I'm here for it. Which of us gets to go first on this 100th episode?
You say that, and I don't even have the spreadsheet open because,
Oh
I was
my God.
prepared. I was prepared.
Were you?
Shh.
Um,
It's
I'm really,
me.
I'm
It's me because last week you did first with Fu Ha, the Chinese general and queen. And then
that's my girl.
yeah, and then I kind of did Diamond Annie and the 40 Elephants, which sounds like a
You kinda
children's
did?
book.
Oh, that would be an amazing children's book. Okay, but like you could do it like okay, so the zookeeper or whatever is Diamond Annie and she has 40 little elephants that she cares for and like the whole story of the 40 elephants told through zoo animals and how theft is not okay could be the end result. But
How it's not okay, but how it's silently like, but if you're gonna do it, here's how you do it.
yeah,
And they're all behind bars.
by the oh, it is a zoo.
It is a zoo. They would be behind bars.
Hmm. This is how we got the plot of Madagascar, for sure.
Okay, so we need to reanalyze who those penguins are because apparently we don't, we have additional questions.
I always assumed the penguins were George Clooney, Brad Pitt, and Matt Damon from Ocean's 11.
That's fair. I do have a story for you,
I'm
and
here to listen.
I am going to tell you the story of Harriet Tubman.
Okay.
And I'm leaving off her title, but the title's in my notes. My sources: National Parks Conservation Association. 5 facts you might not know about Harriet Tubman.
I'm sorry,
American,
was that the National Park Service you just brought into
no,
this for our 100th
national, but
episode?
later
Okay.
on, later on. I mean,
Okay.
it's my third source. Give me a break. But
Okay.
this one was
Okay.
National Parks Conservation Association. A little different.
Okay.
Uh, American Battlefield Trust did a bio on her. National Park Service, Harriet Tubman and the 54th Massachusetts. The Smithsonian, Harriet Tubman just became a one-star general more than 150 years after serving with the Union Army by G. Osa Williams. Okay, so you ready?
That's so cool.
I
Like,
mean,
it took a long time, but that's
look,
awesome.
look, here we are, right? Like, and I almost wanted you to take your headphones off for that because spoilers.
I can take them off now and come back.
Yeah, it would be awkward. We don't need, look, we're
Okay.
awkward enough. We
Don't
don't
make
need
it
to
weird.
feed this, right? Like, don't feed this wolf.
Dude, okay, can I just say the other day I had to attend this event with live humans and they were all live female humans. And
Hard pass.
I,
Burn the building down. Just leave.
right? And I said to my husband while like walking out the door, I turned to him and said, "Pray for me, that I'm not super awkward the whole time." And he looked at me and said, "Or be your super awkward, charming self the whole time. Live your best life."
I mean, just lean into it, right? Your vibe attracts your tribe.
And they keep inviting me to things, so like
Try harder, Angie. If you're
I,
trying to get kicked out, you really need to
I'm
lean
not
into
doing
it.
great.
No, you need to wear your swimsuit over your sweater as you walk in.
Oh, I've been doing it wrong this whole time.
I don't think you should wear it under your sweater, just when I'm honest, but just wear it over the top and invite questions.
Okay, I'll add that to the repertoire.
I'll wait while you report back.
Okay,
All right. So Harriet Tubman, hard
okay.
segue back. She's born 1822. She's got a really cool name, Aramintia Bross, and her mother nicknames her Minty.
Okay, why are we not calling her that the whole time?
I'll get to that
Okay, because I'm devastated now. We could have been saying this for our entire lives.
because Minty is solid and Araminta is beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm
But
here
these
for
are
it.
things. These are things. Okay, so she's born on a plantation in rural Maryland. She's hired out to work at other places doing some grueling jobs. And of course, she's subjected to really harsh, cruel treatment as a child and growing into that young adulthood. When she's a child, there is a field hand who tries to leave the plantation without permission. The overseer does the thing that they're going to do, and so they decide to throw a heavy weight at the person fleeing, and it hits her in the head instead. And she suffers severe trauma and she'll experience headache and seizures the rest of her life. And she actually also gets these visions that she experiences, and she believes these are sent by God, but they occur right at the time she's struck with this weight.
Oh, okay. And this was as a child.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, 1840, her father's freed as a stipulation from the master's will, but he continues to work for the former owner's family because his whole family's there.
This seems like the thing you would do.
Right. Now, her mother and siblings were also supposed to be free, but the law was ignored and they remained enslaved.
Shocking.
I know. Amazing that, nobody stood up for these people. But these are things. So Tubman, she ends up marrying a free black man in 1844, and she changes her name from Araminta to Harriet.
Okay, so this is her personal choice.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
I'll
she,
allow it.
I'm glad. Thank you, Angie.
And not
Let
that my
the
opinion
record
matters
show.
here. The defense will shut up.
By the way, still love that title. So when 1849 rolls around, her owners threaten to sell her. They'd sold her two sisters already. She decides to take matters in her own hands and she's going to skedaddle. She ends up becoming seriously ill with complications from the head injury, and they can't find a buyer for her, so they can't sell her.
But she's married already?
Yes.
So she's married to a free man
Yes,
while
but that doesn't make her
still
free.
being okay, that's I was thinking maybe I got my timeline a little twisted there. So she is of marrying age, married
Mhm.
to a free man, but she is still enslaved herself,
Correct.
and now she's thinking about fleeing the coop.
Correct.
Got it.
Now, her owner suddenly dies, and the family really starts selling everything they can, including all of the slaves. And she doesn't want her family to be separated. She's determined to escape. So, in the first attempt, she's accompanied by her brothers, but that's aborted when they have second thoughts. And that's when she decides to go again on her own, and she escapes via the Underground Railroad into Pennsylvania.
I had no idea the Underground Railroad existed before her.
Same, right?
Brand new to me.
So her first attempt, she tries to leave with her brothers, and that ends up getting aborted because the brothers has some second thoughts. And then she tries to get on her own, and she escapes via the Underground Railroad into Pennsylvania.
Love that.
Now, before leaving, she adopts her mother's first name and her husband's last name. So maybe mother was named Harriet, and maybe that's where the name change comes in.
I mean, that would make sense, especially if you're fleeing. Like,
Right.
changing your name would be brilliant.
Now, she takes his last name even though he, a free black man, declines to join her. I don't understand the
Okay.
reason, but these are things, right? Eventually
Oh, I
she
would have to get. I have a theory.
go
I
ahead.
would have to guess that if the slave holders know she's married, they can come after him just as quickly as they come after her looking for her.
Honestly,
So
that
if
checks.
right, if he declines to go, it would imply he has no knowledge or whereabouts of her, and it keeps them both sort of safe. But that's what I would think.
Okay. Honestly, that's more than I had because I was just like, what happened to like I had questions. They're answered later, but I don't get to know why he opted out.
I mean, that's a reasonable question.
Now, she ends up going 90 miles to Pennsylvania, which I hear, she goes to Pennsylvania. It's like, okay, great. But 90 miles, mid 1800s, feels like a lot longer of a distance. Now,
Hmm.
Pennsylvania itself is a free state, and she's got this brand new identity. And she decides to start supporting herself in Philadelphia, doing some odd jobs. But it's at that point that she hears that her niece and the niece's two children are about to be sold. And that's when Tubman is determined to help. And so she goes back to Maryland. And it's with the assistance of her brother in law that she's able to bring niece and two kiddos back to Philadelphia safely. And
Good.
this was the first trip that she did.
And it's 90 miles.
It's 90 miles. And like one of the things that is incredible is you think she escaped. She's out, but she risks her neck for her family. And that makes sense, right? Because these are her family. You would who among us would leave our family, well, depends on the family member, but would leave our family out to dry.
Facts.
I mean, we have a list.
Ethan, you're walking.
That's Angie's eldest, just for those playing at home.
To be clear, he is not walking, but it's a fun threat to make.
It is. Um, but this is one of the first of many trips that she makes to lead her family and others out to freedom. In one expedition, she contacted her husband in hopes that he's going to follow her to Pennsylvania because, she kind of liked the dude. But he'd remarried and he kind of preferred to stay in Maryland.
Oh, how long was she gone that he was like, well, marriage is good. Bye.
Good question. I mean, she left in 1849, and we're talking, I don't know, I'm assuming 50, 51. So I can't imagine much time had passed.
Yeah. All of a sudden, I don't like him.
I mean, look, he was great at the start and great for a last name, but I feel like that's where his usefulness ran out.
He would be so nice if he just didn't talk.
Okay, so over the course of the next 11 years, Tubman rescues over 70 slaves from Maryland and assists 50 or 60 others who are making their way up to Canada. It's during this time that her reputation in the abolitionist community grows, and she becomes acquainted with two people. One I think you know, the other you may not know, Frederick Douglass and John Brown.
I just so bad wanted to hear you say Cassius Clay.
No, I really wish. I really wish. But Frederick Douglass, I'm sure you know.
Frederick Douglass had the great chops, right?
Yes. Well, he
Yep.
was,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Uh, Black man, wrote many books.
Great hair.
Yes. John Brown. Any clues?
Off the top of my head, the name doesn't ring a bell.
First white guy convicted of treason in the United States.
Oh, okay. Loving
Here's
this.
let's get going to this. She moves her base to Auburn, New York, closer to the Canadian border, and this is where she conducts her last rescue mission in November of 1861. And this is as the Civil War is enveloping the nation. And it's in Canada that she meets John Brown. Okay, now John Brown is an abolitionist who believed that if he armed the enslaved people with weapons, that it would lead to widespread revolt and end slavery.
I mean, he's not on the wrong thought path there. Like if you give them the tools they need,
They
people
will
will
rise
figure
up,
out how to handle their business.
especially if they outnumber the people, oppressing them. This seems
Seems
like a foregone
logical.
conclusion. You just roll for initiative at that point.
Charisma.
That's literally it. Like, so Tubman helps him plan his raid on a federal arsenal by recruiting supporters and sharing her contacts and information on escape routes in the region. And Brown values her knowledge and refers to her as General Tubman. He gives respect where respect is
Yes.
due.
Yes.
Eventually, he formed a
She's
small
giving
army.
Princess Leia vibes right now. I love it.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Brown doesn't have a good end though, because eventually he formed a small army and took an arsenal at Harper's Ferry and was soon captured by the Marines and sentenced to death.
Ugh.
Many of the men who joined his raid were killed, including his two sons.
Devastating.
Mind you, I believe I didn't double check this, but I think he was charged with treason. Charged with treason because he didn't support slavery. He
What
might
a
have gone
thing to be
about it in the
charged
wrong
with
way.
treason about.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, these are things. Um, Now, the act of resistance tends to sharpen tensions between the North and the South because apparently
What?
everyone's going to get deep in their feels about this. It serves as a major catalyst for the war. And Tubman is going to later say he's done more in dying than 100 men would in living.
Okay.
So
Sometimes you just gotta say it like it is.
she basically calls him a martyr and says, "Thank you for your service," and goes on.
Love that for him.
And this is when the Civil War kicks off. And Tubman doesn't stand on the sidelines because I've only known her work in the Underground Railroad. I didn't know about her work in the Civil War.
Okay, yeah, I thought it was all Underground Railroad.
She offers her services to the Union Army in the early part of 1862, and she goes to South Carolina to provide badly needed nursing care for Black soldiers and newly liberated slaves. And then working with a man named General David Hunter, she begins spying and scouting missions behind Confederate lines.
Oh,
Let that sink in. Like she's playing for keeps.
she is real about it.
Like, first off, You've already escaped slavery. You've already risked your neck countless times, and you went back for seconds. You went back as a spy when even white spies were going to be dealt with in the most harshest of ways, and you
Listen,
double
she was
down.
eating and she was leaving no crumbs.
This woman, I swear to you. Now, in June of 1863, under the leadership of a man named Colonel James Montgomery of the 54th Massachusetts, she serves as the key advisor for the operations in Combahee Ferry, South Carolina, in which regiment of soldiers whom she led. So she's leading troops in this event. And it's under Montgomery's orders that she leads this raiding party. Now, this raiding party is like this is like the economic power in the South. And she's burning wealthy plantations down and liberating enslaved people held there.
Is she wearing pants too? I
Unclear.
don't know why that matters, but the visual I have is like pants.
I think every picture I've seen of her is her in a dress. So
That's what, yeah.
I want to say yes, pants, because pants are liberty, but I can't prove it.
I'm sorry. Pants because pants are liberty.
I mean, I'm not lying.
Pockets. She's not wrong.
It's during this raid that numbers range, right? But it's somewhere up in the range of around 800 enslaved men, women, and children that are liberated.
I love that.
And in the Underground Railroad, we're talking like in the neighborhood of 70. So in just one raid, she just tenfold that. Boom, go.
Get it, mama.
And this represented one of the largest groups of enslaved people ever emancipated at one time. Boom.
And it took us how long to give her a star?
You know, we've still got pages. Still got pages, right?
Okay.
Like these are notes. It's following this raid that she kind of slips back into more conventional role that you kind of would imagine women to hold during the Civil War. And this is where she's serving meals to men of the regiment, including she has one where she claims that she gave Robert Gould Shaw's last meal. She said he ate his final breakfast July 18th, 1863, the day the 54th Massachusetts launched a brave but doomed assault on the Confederate-held Fort Wagner, which I think anybody who serves in a wartime capacity on the front lines, they're going to have these stories where they know, they looking back, this was the last interaction I had with that human.
Yeah.
Now, it's after the battle, while the survivors counted the devastating casualties, that the wounded went to segregated field hospitals. And here's where we have some tie-ins. Clara Barton, founder of the Red Cross,
It's my
greeted
girl.
the white officers when they arrived to Hilton Head, while the black rank and file returned to Buford and entered the care of Harriet Tubman.
I feel like they were winning.
They might have been winning, but I mean, what if we didn't make them go further? What if we just kind of, hey, you served.
You should be field hospitaled here,
Right.
where we're at, right
Yeah.
here. Who cares?
Do not
Yeah.
go further. Park and let's get this done.
Let's collect your $200 and get you new socks.
Yeah. Now, in 1905, she does take a trip to Boston. This is after the Civil War, obviously. And she visits a memorial dedicated to Robert Gould Shaw and the officers and soldiers of the 54th Massachusetts. A journalist who encountered her at the memorial described how she gazed long and tenderly at the magnificent work of the sculptor and dropped a silent tear for the departed dead,
Hmm.
which is lovely. The resulting article in the Boston Herald primarily emphasized that Tubman's safe, matronly role as Shaw's nurse, who served the young black colonel his last meal and healed his wounded soldiers. It briefly referenced her scouting work and only kind of objectified it as smuggling medicines and other goodies to U.S. forces and completely ignored her significant role in gathering the intel.
Well, because she's a woman. Ovaries.
A black woman.
Which is just even harder than having ovaries.
Yeah. Now, it really kind of negated the entire raid that she did, where she freed the massive amount of slaves, the biggest push ever at one time. And it's after the war that she returns to Auburn, New York, and she marries a Civil War veteran. And even though her work in the Union Army was publicized, very much so, she has a hard time getting a pension from the government.
Hmm, weird. Didn't see
Now,
that coming.
she's got all of these roles. Like there should be maybe, I'm not going to say maybe she should double dip and get multiple, but I'm just going to say that she's listed doing many things. She ends up
Yeah,
only
she's
getting,
not sitting on the sidelines, that's for
yeah,
sure.
it's the nurse's pension that she gets in the 1880s.
I'm kind of mad by that.
Yeah, because I didn't go through and figure out how much each pension was, but I'm going to assume that the nurses weren't making as much as those on the front lines or doing spy work.
Or somebody with the rank of general.
The general bit comes later. The
Well, you
general bit
said
comes later.
earlier that even the gentleman there called her the general.
Well, yeah, but he was saying it as an honorific, just like
Yeah,
someone at work might call you the queen, but they might mean it in all honesty and sincerity, but you're not going to be sovereign over a nation.
damn it.
I'm just saying you've got to get Todd to work harder.
Where is my crown?
These are things. Now, she doesn't, okay, so she gets a nurse's pension in the 1880s. She ends up not sitting still because this woman just can't. She takes on the women's suffrage movement with the same determination that she showed during the abolition movement.
Because yes.
Now it's 1890s and she's really kind of on the struggle bus. I don't mean that to downplay it, but the pain in her head from the massive head trauma that she suffered as a kid, it's affecting her ability to sleep. And she eventually finds a doctor in Boston who's going to operate on her brain surgery before the 1900s.
Is wild.
Now, she opts to not get anesthesia.
Oh, good God.
While the doctor's cutting into her open skull to perform the surgery, she chooses to bite a bullet, which is something she had seen the soldiers during the Civil War do when they suffered pain on the battlefield.
Literally bite the bullet.
Literally bite the bullet.
Oh.
And from what I hear, it's unclear if surgery improved her condition.
Mm.
Now, at this point, post surgery, she establishes the Harriet Tubman Home for the Aged on her property that's just adjacent to her own. And she has the surgery this wound has been just horrific from her from day one. But now she's basically penniless and she's forced to move in to the home herself in 1911.
Okay.
And she dies there on March 10th, 1913, surrounded by her friends and family. And then she's buried with military honors on Fort Hill Cemetery in Auburn. Now, very few women have national park sites dedicated to them, and Harriet Tubman has two.
That a mama.
The Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad National Historic Park in Dorchester County, Maryland, in, interprets Harriet's early life and features a visitor center with a thorough and informative exhibits and the site of the plantation where Tubman was enslaved as a girl, as well as the general store where she suffered her traumatic head injury. And then there's also the Harriet Tubman National Historical Park in Auburn, New York, and that tells her story later in life. It includes the house that she owned and eventually donated to become a home for the ill and the elderly, as well as the Thompson Memorial African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church.
Oh, that's a name.
I'm grateful I got it out in one go. She raised the money to build that. The visitors can also see Tubman's grave at the nearby cemetery that's unaffiliated with the historical park. So you kind
Okay.
of get both bookends of her life with those two parks.
That's awesome.
And then it was Veterans Day 2024 when Harriet Tubman had posthumously recognized as the one-star Brigadier General in Maryland's National Guard at a ceremony where officials in the abolitionist home state honored her service during the Civil War. And I have
Mm,
a quote that is awesome. Harriet Tubman's military service was defined by her bravery, wit, and dedication to doing what is right, and it truly stands as an example for all veterans to emulate, said Major General Janine L. Burkhead, the head of the Maryland National Guard, in a statement. And she goes on to say, I'm so proud that her legacy will officially be tied to the Maryland National Guard. She was born here, lived here, and served here, just like our soldiers and airmen.
mm.
And I've got one
That gives me
last
the
quote.
chills.
This is a quote from Tubman herself. She says, I was the conductor of the Underground Railroad for 8 years, and I can say what most conductors can't say. I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger.
Mm, what a freaking legend.
Yeah.
Thank you for telling me that because up to this point, all I knew, all we're ever told is that she was the, the Underground Railroad. Like, that's it. The more you learn, the more you learn.
Yes.
Oh,
And I loved that she kept going back.
mm-hmm.
Like she kept showing up for her community. She kept doing what needed to be done. And I feel like we we can't ask any more of the Harriet Tubmans. We need to be the Harriet Tubmans.
Yeah. th- we cannot always expect somebody else to be that.
It's there was a quote, and I'm going to butcher it, so brace yourself. I think it was a Buddhist monk who said, "Everybody wants to change the world, but nobody wants to help mom do the dishes."
Facts.
And the truth is, like, changing the world is a lot of, most of the time, not
Doing the
Harriet
dishes.
Tubman. It's a lot of real small movements. It's a lot of real small things.
Mm-hmm.
But if we all do those little things, we're going to change the world.
He's not wrong. Wow. I have no idea how to segue into my story.
This is what I'm here for. I'm here to just rob the room of all the energy.
That was not robbing the room of all the energy at all. That was amazing. Um, hmm. I'm just gonna do it. I'm just gonna do it. Okay? While I sit here and think on how awesome Harriet Tubman is and how I'm gonna make this work. Um, hmm. That's so cool. Just nerding out over here. So cool. So cool. I'm just imagining her crying her one little tear and being like, "All right then, back to work we go.
Mhm.
Gotta get women the vote." Wow. All right. Okay, so for my story, I kind of went I went back to the very roots that is unhinged history and picked quite possibly one of, if not the most unhinged badass of World War II. Because it wouldn't be an unhinged history story if you didn't have national parks as a source and one of us didn't talk about something from World War II.
And now we just need to brace ourselves for for syphilis's involvement.
Check it out. I don't say syphilis once.
You
Well,
just
now I
did.
did. Yeah, damn it. Yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna do something I don't think either of us have done before, but it seems like the appropriate way to go about this. I'm going to start my story by showing you a picture.
Yes.
Yeah,
Way to keep me engaged.
you're welcome. Can you see my screen?
Loading, loading. Oh, are you? Oh, you're doing Jack Churchill. You're doing
I
Jack
am doing
Churchill.
I am doing Jack Churchill. Yep. Do you see him in the bottom right corner with
I
his
knew the
sword?
image. I had to look at the image and be super excited and then like say his name and then realize all of the other context clues on that screen to realize that you are in fact doing Jack Churchill.
I am in fact doing Jack Churchill.
I will delete him from my story ideas.
I was so scared that you were going to do the same story because he is so delightfully unhinged. Like, if the bet when I read his story, like his full story, I literally screamed reading it. I was laughing
Hmm.
so hard. Like, it couldn't get bigger. Like, this is a person that is the very definition of doing the absolute most. Like,
You were 2 weeks from me telling this story.
yes. 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 I don't, sorry.
No, no, I
I'll
haven't because I
pretend
haven't
like I
dived
didn't hear
in.
it.
I haven't dived in. I'm like, you know what? I know enough to be like delightfully entertained. Can't wait to learn more.
Yes. Okay, so my sources are historicuk.com. This is the history of fighting Jack Churchill by Miriam Bibby. Warfarehistorynetwork.com. Mad Jack Churchill, a rare breed of warrior. This is the July 2005 article by Robert Barr Smith. A website called Badass of the Week, which I thought was just awesome.
I feel like I've been there. I don't know if I've used it as a source, but I've been there.
I can't say I particularly used it as a source as the information that was in there was in all my other sources, but it's just so fun that you kind of have to bring it up.
I'm here for it.
Um, an All That's Interesting article by Katie Serena in January of 23. His finishing school actually has a blurb about him on their website.
The fact that this man goes to a quote unquote finishing school is unhinged unto itself.
Like, and so the best part about it is a lot of the sources talk about his childhood was so like emblematic of what it was like to be a young British boy in this time frame. Like the schools he went to, the life he had as a child. And I'm like, oh, so that's just what you could expect. Like, okay. Um,
Oh, to be a
there
young British white boy
at
in
the
the
turn of the century,
right.
yeah, living your very best life in your knickers and shorts. Like, yeah. I do use Wikipedia. They had the best timeline of his life. So where some of the other sources had great information to see it in like order, Wikipedia had that the most clear. So I was like, okay,
Okay.
we can use this. This works. Um, there is actually a website called Scots Sword Wielding,
Of course
as
there is.
Scots as in like Scots, like Scottish,
Yeah.
which I think is really awesome. And then another one called Helensburgh Heritage Co.uk has an article on him as well by Donald Fullerton from 2016. So, without further ado, John Malcolm Thorpe Fleming Churchill.
What a name. And the fact that we've
Yeah,
got Fleming in there. Can we just stop there?
indeed, right?
Fleming hits again.
Yet again. He was born in Colombo, British Ceylon on September 16th, 1906. So his parents were Alec Fleming Churchill, and I think this part's so delightful. We kind of don't do stuff like this anymore, but his father was later of East Sussex, and his mother, Eleanor Elizabeth, she was the daughter of John Alexander Bond Bell of Killenhard, County Craven, Ireland, and of Dimbala, Ceylon. Like nobody says where they're of anymore. Why is that?
Because it's too cumbersome and who the hell cares?
Yeah, it makes me sad.
Well, I mean,
Um,
you say that, but it's like, where would I say? Am I from Merced? Am I from Japan? Like,
I'm
which
Teresa
which
of
one do you
Merced,
claim?
later Japan.
But then you get the people who move all the time. It's like, well, you're just showing off.
Rude. So anyway, his father also like his father was from a family had that had long been in the Oxfordshire area, but Alec John's father, was the district engineer in the Ceylon Civil Service. So they do a lot of coming. His childhood is spent traveling back and forth from England to the Asian continent. Like they go back and forth. In 1910, the Churchills moved to British Hong Kong. So
Wow.
he has seen some places in his childhood. The family returns to England in 1917. Churchill is educated at the Dragon School, Oxford, King's William College on the Isle of Man and Sandhurst, and then he graduates from the Royal Military College in Sandhurst in 1926. Um, at which point he's commissioned into the 2nd Battalion of the Manchester Regiment. And I think it is really fair to note that warfarehistory.net says this about the regiment. They are, quote, a storied regiment with battle honors dating back to the 18th century. The regiment had been raised as the 63rd and 96th regiments of foot and had shed their blood for Britain all across the world. 42 battalions of Manchester served during World War I alone.
Wow.
For
Those are
context,
big numbers.
yeah, Google tells me that one regiment is made up of 3,000 to 5,000 soldiers, and 42 of them were from the Manchesters.
Can we just say that England is a small island, all things considered?
Yeah. So it like that gives you a really
Bloodthirsty,
good, yeah, spices and all that.
but not in their blood.
No, heavens. Or on their food, really.
Well, in their blood, not on their food. That's what I meant to
Yeah,
say.
you know. So his first post was Rangoon in Burma, where he is then sent to do a signals course in Pona. And on completion, he drives his motorcycle the 1,500 miles across the Indian subcontinent. At one point, he has a run-in with a water buffalo. Um,
Of course.
they both live, though, I think. I didn't hear otherwise. He makes it back to post in time to serve in the Burma Rebellion, which happened between the years of 30 and 32. At this point, and evidently just for the hell of it, he becomes an excellent bagpipe player, courtesy of the pipe major of the Cameron Highlands.
I feel like that's to end of sentence of nearly most of his life for the hell of it.
Yes, 100%, because I was bored, sir. Um, like, honestly, I feel like if he had met Sergeant Skippy,
Oh
like,
my
the
God.
two of them would have been best of friends, besties
Yes.
all the way.
Because Sergeant Skippy, as unhinged and delightful as he is, was also a card-carrying member of the rule followers.
And so, so I think it's pretty cool though. He learns piping from the pipe major of the Cameron Highlanders. He is also awarded the first of his service medals at this point, which is the Indian General Service Medal with the Burma clasp. I didn't look into what that medal looks like, but it's the first of many. By the end of 32, he's back in England and probably bored as hell, but he's still playing the pipes. He was taken to being, we'll say, a bit unruly and would do things like playing the pipes for the orderly officer to the guard room at 3 o'clock in the morning.
He
Um,
needed to wake up. He needed to understand what Amazing Grace sounded like via bagpipe.
3 in the morning. I just get the vibe already that Churchill was not designed for peacetime. Like
No, no.
he was just bored. So there's another point during this time frame that he appears on parade carrying an umbrella, which is absolutely like a mortal sin in any army. And when he was asked what was meant by such outlandish behavior, Churchill replied, quote, "Because it's raining, sir." Which you can imagine is not an answer that is, quote, calculated to endear him to the frozen soul of any battalion adjutant.
No.
So, so after 10 years of this, he retires and he does a few other things, like he gets a job on the editorial staff of a Nairobi paper, which was
I mean,
evidently also boring.
honestly, I was expecting bagging groceries like our man Colin Govins. He worked for a
You know,
textile company first, actually, when I think of it.
I don't think he ever actually set foot in a grocery store. At least not for my story. After he was on the editorial staff in Nairobi, he decided he would also work as a model in magazine ads and as a movie extra.
So he's
Because, like, why not?
beautiful. I
He is
forgot that.
beautiful. I've got some pictures to show you in just a little bit. He is
Oh,
gorgeous.
I'm so excited with my life.
As you should be. He appeared in the movie The Drum. It's a movie of fighting on the Northwest frontier in which he could play the bagpipes. And because he rode on the River Isis, he won a cameo in A Yank at Oxford and a couple other films. On being in the film The Thief of Baghdad, he got to show off his archery skills.
Of course he's got
Because,
archery skills.
because why don't you? You know? I mean,
Idle hands and all, you know.
and all
He,
that.
of
Yeah,
course he knows by archery.
of course he does. In the summer of 38, Churchill placed second in the officers' class of the piping championship at Aldershot. This is considered an extraordinary feat since he was the only Englishman among the 70 or so competitors.
And you know the Scots were razzing him beyond belief.
Oh, yeah, they were. In 39, he would represent Great Britain and Norway at the World Archery Championship because, again, bored as hell, why not? Um, but at this point, war is on the horizon, and just as the German army smashes into Poland, Jack Churchill returns to the British Army and the Manchester Regiment and was shipped off to France. He would later say, quote, I was back in my red coat, the country having gotten into a jam in my absence.
Yes.
A soldier get
Yes.
a soldier. To say he was happy to be back is probably an understatement. While in
His
the
neighbors
expeditionary,
were happy he was back.
oh, 100% sure of it. So while he's in the expeditionary force to France, he would use and carry his bow. Historic UK said, quote, knowing that the bow was extraordinarily effective weapon in skilled hands, as it was silent and accurate up to 200 yards. So, um, he has, for bragging rights, the last known confirmed kill with a bow in battle.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does.
I mean, because why not, right? When his company was trapped at the Battle of Lepene, Churchill killed the first approaching Nazi soldier with his longbow, then would use two machine guns to fight back until they ran out of ammunition. He even managed to get the remainder of his company to safety by leading them through the enemy lines in the dark, despite having been shot in the shoulder. Because doing the absolute most. That's why. By 1940, he's second in command of an infantry company in the regiment's 2nd Battalion. It said that, quote, he presented a strange, almost medieval figure at the head of his men, carrying not only his war bow and arrows, but his sword as well.
Yes! I knew the sword was coming. As soon as you said medieval, I was like, we're getting to
Hmm.
the sword.
We are getting to the sword. As befitted of his love of all things Scottish, Jack Churchill carried the basket-hilted claybag, which is technically a claybag uh, is sort of like a claymore, but the claymore is obviously it's enormous and two-handed. The claybag he could wield in one hand. In case
I
you're
like how
curious,
you say
because
obviously, because we're all weapons scholars here.
sorry, sorry, claymores too. Anyway, some of us grew up loving swords. So, when asked by a general who was awarding him a decoration why he carried a sword into action, Churchill responded with, quote, in my opinion, sir, any officer who goes into action without his sword is improperly dressed.
Uh,
And
Churchill, this isn't 1850 anymore. We can leave that at home. We're in our Second World War. We've amped it up a bit. We
he's
have
still
firepower.
gonna wear the sword. He's still gonna wear the sword.
And honestly, he should.
I mean, he's not wrong. He is improper. You know what it gave me when I read that the first time? The first thing I thought of is that scene in The Patriot where the Frenchman comes out of his tent and Mel Gibson's like, "Why are you so worried about being dressed?" And he said, "A soldier's not like, I don't know who I'm going to meet today. I have to look fabulous." Like, you don't go to war without looking fabulous, Mel Gibson, or soldier without carrying a sword.
I'm about to say
Anyway.
it's giving Night Witch who curls her hair before she puts on her helmet.
Same thing, because you don't know who you're going to meet on the battlefield.
Same, same.
You just don't know, you know? I love this part so much. Warfare History Network says that in the war diary of a 4th Infantry Brigade to which Churchill's battalion had belonged, commented on the extraordinary figure, saying, "One of the most reassuring sights of the embarkation from Dunkirk was the sight of Captain Churchill passing down the beach with his bows and arrows. His high example and great work were a great help to the 4th Infantry Brigade."
He's giving
Because
Legolas.
really, he is. Um, I I do have to say because it this anyway, just let me get here. On December 27th of 1941, Churchill was second in command of the number 3 Commando in Operation Archery, which was a raid on the German garrison at Vagsøy, Norway. Picture it if you will. The ramps fell on the first landing craft, probably a Higgins boat. We've mentioned him before.
Hmm.
He leaps forward from his position, playing March of the Cameron Men on his bagpipes before throwing a grenade and charging in his battle.
I'm here
Okay,
for all of this. The sheer
right?
unhingedness that is everything Jack Churchill.
This man supposedly rode a bicycle to Dunkirk with his bow and arrow hanging from the frame.
He's got to put it somewhere.
I mean, okay, it makes me laugh because like I don't know the context of where he was prior to have to get to Dunkirk, but like were you out of harm's way and then you heard what was going on?
This
So
man
you
will never remain out of harm's way.
I don't think so.
The
Um
map of harm's way is Jack Churchill.
it's in his way. Um Facts. So for his actions both at Dunkirk and Vagsøy in Norway, he receives his first military cross. Shortly after Dunkirk, he was training in Scotland for a new mission slash squad when he meets and falls madly in love with Rosamund Denny.
It was either going to be her or a weapon, let's be honest.
Might have been both. She was the daughter of a Scottish shipbuilding baronet. They were married in Dunbarton in the spring of 41. They would have 2 children, and their marriage would last until he died 55 years later. He died on their wedding anniversary,
I
which
don't love that
is,
he died on the wedding anniversary, but I do love
no,
that he was happily long married.
and he absolutely adored her. Um, he loved Scotland, and if that wasn't obvious already, he enjoyed training there, and he took time to tell his commandos things like, quote, "There's nothing worse than sitting on your bum bottom doing nothing just because the enemy happens to leave you alone for a moment while he's got to go at you at the unit on your flank. Pitch in and support your neighbor any way you can." Um, the remainder of Churchill's war experience was just astonishing. He led troops through Sicily, and during the Salerno landings, encouraging them as always with the sound of bagpipes. And using his sword, he was responsible for the capture of at least 42 German troops and a mortar crew,
Yes.
right? Um, some sources say that he would actually lose his sword in some sort of hand-to-hand combat right about this fight. But never fear, because later he walked back to retrieve it, and on the way there, it said he encountered a very disoriented American patrol who were mistakenly walking towards enemy line. And when the NCO in command of the patrol refuses to turn around because Churchill's like, "Hey, bud, no, you're going the wrong way," Churchill tells him that he's going on his way and he would not come back for a bloody third time. Like, you're either gonna figure this out or you're not. I'm not coming
Right.
to get you. So in that raid where he took prisoner the 42 soldiers, it says that one night he single-handedly takes 42. I think he actually had one other source says that he had like his lieutenant, like his second in command with him. But the basic gist is he would use only his sword. He would take one patrolling guard as a human shield and went from sentry post to sentry post, sneaking up on the guards and then shoving the sword in their faces until they surrendered. When he was asked about how he was able to capture them so easily, his response was, I maintain that as long as you tell a German loudly and clearly what to do, if you are senior to him, he will cry out, Johal, which means yes, sir, and get on it with enthusiastically and efficiently, whatever the situation.
I love the breakdown.
Whatever. It works. Um, While in Yugoslavia in 1944, because again, we can't sit still when we're moving from place to place, his unit was wiped out and either wounded or dead. He was the only one to survive without issues. So he evidently sits down and chooses to play Will You Not Come Back Again on his pipes until the advancing Germans knock him out and take him prisoner, thinking him to be related to the one and only Winston Churchill. He was not. About this time, he gets sent to Sachsenhausen concentration camp. He tunnels his way out, only to be recaptured, and sent to a POW camp in Austria. Unsurprisingly, he escapes again
This man.
and starts to walk the Brenner Pass to Verona, Italy. That was about 150 miles, but thankfully, on the eighth day of his escape, he's hobbling along. He's got a sprained ankle. He's not feeling his best, but he catches sight of a column of armored vehicles, and their hulls are marked with the unmistakably white star of the United States Army. He manages to flag one down and persuades the crew that in spite of his scruffy appearance, he was indeed a British colonel. He later tells his friend who would write a biography on him, Rex King Clark, I couldn't walk very well and was so out of breath I could scarcely talk, but I still managed a credible Sandhurst salute, which may have done the trick.
May have. I mean, bro is as UK as it gets.
Oh, and wait till you see his pictures. Oh my gosh. There's literally so many stories to say, but I'll just say that Churchill nearly served in the Pacific too, because I mean, he was in Burma, but that was before the war. So he gets sent back to Burma. However, by the time he arrives, the war is over. And at one point, he's asked about his feelings at the end of the war, and this is the reason I chose to do him for my 100th episode story. His response was, if it wasn't for those damn Yanks, we could have kept the war going another 10 years.
And leave it to him to be like, I'm bored now. Thanks. I'm gonna go help Martha with the roses.
You've ruined everything. After the war, he has qualified as a parachuter because why not? And he's transferred to the Seaforth Highlanders. But soon he's posted to Mandatory Palestine as the executive officer of the 1st Battalion of the Highland Land Light Infantry. So it's 1948. This is just before the end of the British mandate in the region. Churchill and 12 of his soldiers attempt to assist the Hadash medical convoy as they come under attack by Arab forces. Supposedly, Churchill, he's like one of the first men on the scene. He's banging on the bus door and he's offering to evacuate these members of the convoys, despite the fact that the British military has issued orders to keep out of the fight. But, like, he's not known for backing down at any point. So, do you think he's going to listen to those orders? They refuse his offer, believing that there's some other organized aid coming to their rescue. No relief arrives. Churchill and his 12 men proceed to provide cover fire against the opposing forces. Two of the convoy trucks catch fire. 77 of the 79 people inside of them were killed.
Oh, those are not good
Today,
odds.
not good odds. Today, that event is known as the Hadash, hopefully I'm pronouncing that right, Medical Convoy Massacre. Now, as sad as that part is, there is a silver lining. After the massacre, he is able to coordinate the evacuation of 700 Jewish doctors, students, and patients from the Hadash Hospital on the Hebrew University campus, which is where the convoy had been heading in the first place.
Mm.
Of the experience, he said, quote, about 150 insurgents armed with weapons varying from blunderbusses and old flintlocks to modern Stein and Bren guns took cover behind a cactus patch in the grounds of the American colony. I went and faced them. About 250 riflemen were on the edge of our property shooting at the convoy. I begged them to desist from using the grounds of the American colony for such a dastardly purpose. Literally love this man. On his return to England, he becomes involved in the Army Apprentices scheme, which is, I had to look up because I didn't fully understand what that was, but my understanding of it is now that it's basically where once you're done serving your time, you can go to this sort of school where you learn skills that you can do outside of the army.
Like crochet? Like, oh no, like reintegration.
Sort of, I think that's the way that I understand it to be. Like you can be taught like job skills, you know?
Yeah. So you
He
can,
would,
okay.
yeah, you could go back into the work field, especially for those soldiers who went straight from school to the war. Like they don't have any prior
Right.
work experience, right? So on his return to England after that, he goes about refurbishing steamboats and he continues motorcycling. But because being eccentric was one of his many charms, one of his favorite things to do on the way home from work on the train was take passengers by surprise by all of a sudden flinging his briefcase out the window. Um,
That would be
what they,
expensive.
right? But what they didn't know is that he was aiming it accurately into his garden as the train passed. He just didn't want to carry it home.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Right? Um, at home, according to his son, he was a peace-loving and unassuming man. People are less likely to shoot you if you smile at them, was one of the things he often said. Um, after the quite the life he had, he died March 8, 1996, at 89 years
96?
old. 96, yeah, we were alive for this man.
I was a sixth grader.
And so was I, right? Um, for a man who spent most of his life doing the absolute most, at home he was quiet and unassuming. He loved poetry and trees and animals, even the bugs. He clearly adored his wife. One of the jokes that he made after he received his second cross for being a wounded soldier, they're not entirely sure how he received the wound, but it was a gnarly gash across his forehead, and he said he would often joke about saying that he would steal Rosamund's lipstick to patch up the wound so that he could continue with his wounded warrior story. Like, first of all, I love that he called her Rosamund. Like he didn't, he was always proper. Um, but just an absolute delight. In March of 2014, the Royal Norwegian Explorers Club published a book that features Churchill, naming him one of the finest explorers and adventurers of all time. Historic UK says, quote, he led from the front. He never led from the rear. Like he was in the thick of the fight with his men, and I absolutely love that about him. His unique skills and boldness contributed to his own survival and that of his troops. And his motto, any officer who goes into action without his sword is in fact improperly dressed.
Indeed.
Would you care to dazzle yourself with some photos of this rock star of a human?
I would be upset if you said no.
Here's photo one.
So we're seeing a very dapper elderly man. He is wearing a suit that is double-breasted. He is full-shouldered despite being older, and you can tell the muscle mass is waning. Uh, but proud is a word that feels understated.
Yes. This is a man who knows how to wear a sword.
He's wearing a suit, and the suit he's wearing says, I know how to wear a sword, even though there is no sword pictured.
Indeed. Here's him with his bow as a younger man.
He is indeed a younger man. You are seeing the bow, you are seeing the wrist guard. He's wearing presumably a polo shirt.
I think of some sort, and I think that's a beret he has on.
I was gonna say beret, but I didn't want to call that out, so thank you for taking the lead.
You're welcome. I love this one. Churchill is the one front and center with the cane.
Of course he is. He is in front of a group of people of mixed nationalities, presumably a large amount of Indian soldiers, and they are looking off in at a 45-degree angle, presumably at the horizon. He's using his cane to point.
Yeah, he's instructing some sort of lesson here. I'm unclear what the lesson is, but they're all learning something in this image. I absolutely love it. And then here is him and his wife.
Oh,
Because I couldn't not include his wife. Like she's such a cutie patootie.
and okay, so when you talk about him being so demure, so kind at home, um, like honestly, what you're seeing on his wedding day is a man in a full uniform, but he is not the proud man we've been speaking of. This man has his shoulders dropped. He's arm in arm with his new bride. He is meek.
hmm I
And
think
his
she was the powerhouse.
Yeah, I mean, because she has her shoulders back. She is
Yeah.
clearly like they're both smiling, but he is meek in comparison to her.
There's a little story that talks about how in his retirement the two of them could often be found on like yachts on the river, and he would proudly take her direction. She was the captain of the ship. So
I
you could
love a
often find
man
her
that
yelling
comfortable.
commands, right? I mean, the man wore a sword into battle in World War II. He's pretty solid, I think.
Yeah, his masculinity firmly established. He doesn't need to
Firmly.
lord it over anybody else.
Yep. So that is my unhinged badass of the week.
I am for
Jack
it.
Churchill.
I'm grateful you covered it.
Just remember, you're not dressed if you're not wearing a sword. So
TSA
that's
says
it.
otherwise.
Well, you know, they haven't met Jack Churchill yet.
Nor will they. He
Unfortunately, they don't
passed.
make them like they used to. I think
Amen.
he is a rare breed. And one of the things that I love about him that was really evident across all the sources is that he wasn't a braggart. Like he had no problem telling you his war stories, but he didn't like go out and like look for people to tell him to. Like
Mm,
his son knew them all, right? Because
right.
they would chat and stuff, but it wasn't like he was out looking for the next guy to regale. If you asked him, he would tell you, and he would tell you with delight in his eyes and laughter and all of that, but it wasn't like he was trying to be the center of attention. He was just doing his thing
Right. Ugh.
and putting his wife's lipstick in his forehead every now and
I
then.
mean, you got to milk it a little bit
I, for everything that he's got.
because he's not saying back in my day. He's being like, "Oh, my little head hurts."
My war wound. And the best part is no one can corroborate how he got it. Like he was obviously probably knocked out, but he doesn't remember because he never says, "Oh, the wall smashed me in," or "Oh, it was a piece of
Or
shrapnel." But
how many times do you get done with something and you hear you're bleeding? I'm not. Yeah, you're right there.
yeah,
Oh, because you're just like so fixated on the event. I can't imagine that war is much less intensive than, say, weed eating
bonking
or
your knee.
when's the last time I did something that caused blood, you know?
Yeah. It just it makes me laugh so hard. Like I was expecting to find out that he was the guy down at the pub regaling everybody, and he was in fact at home
Negative.
reading poetry and looking at pictures of bugs.
He's the one that actually could have. If you're going to be the one regaling everybody with your stories day in, day out, you're bottom of the well. That's all you've got.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's Mad Jack Churchill
All right.
in
Well,
a nutshell.
if you've enjoyed this history of unhinged history and you're thinking like, "Oh my gosh, I can't wait to believe or hear what they're going to do next week." We don't know. We might know, but we haven't told the other one yet. So rate, review,
As per
subscribe.
our earlier conversation, because this
Yeah.
was her story in 2 weeks.
I mean, look, I've got some things plotted out, but yeah. And share us with your favorite bagpipe player. And on that note,
Player. Yeah.
goodbye.
Bye. Fact checks all her numbers, you guys. She could be so full of crap right now.
I'm editing all of that out, Angie. You rat bastard.
Now you're editing all this out too.